Hi folks, it's Erev Shabbos, it's Shushan Purim, and it's David Ostriker in Carmiel. Today is March 2nd, I believe. I hope I'm right. We had a great Purim yesterday, finishing at a Su'udah with good friends. Miss all of you. The Sudas Purim for us was always a very big event for us in Toronto, and so those of you who we didn't get to celebrate with this year, we hope next year in Carmiel. I want to talk for a minute. There's so much to talk about because it's just after Purim. Here is Shushan Purim, and by the way, Shushan Purim, even in cities that were not walled at the time of Joshua, seems to be a kind of celebration. You can hear it outside. You'll also hear music going on, etc. Carmiel shops are closed already, and the streets are closed, and people are partying and enjoying all of what there can be Shushan Purim. I hope that's not a negative siren, but more of a joyous one that we're hearing in the back end. But literally a 2-minute walk from here, the major streets are all shut down to traffic, and people are having a great time. And as soon as I finish here, Yelena and I are going down to the Midrachov, which is where the center of this event. But I'm not going to talk about Shushan Purim. I just did, but I won't. I want to talk a little bit about KiTissa. KiTissa is a very, very important parsha. It is the parsha of Moshe's return with the Ten Commandments, with the Luchos, and it is a tragic parsha because it's also the parsha of the golden calf. And we hold that every avera that we make, every missed mark that we have, is related in some way to this sin of the golden calf. The idea of creating, after witnessing so many open miracles, to creating a idol is a very strange one and a troubling one. But there's also one other element of this that has always fascinated me, and it's something I'm going to discuss today really for the first time in a public manner. KiTissa is an interesting parsha, and in it is a tremendous revelation of the nature of the Exodus and the populace in the wilderness. I'm choosing my words carefully. What happens? Moshe goes up to the mountain to receive the Torah. And he says he's going to be gone for 40 days, and our Mishnah says that there might have been a counting error, and he didn't get down on the 40th day, and the Jews began to worry that he's not returning. Maybe he's been destroyed on the top of the mountain. Maybe he's become a malach and risen to heaven. It's very unclear. But they begin to search very quickly, those left behind, the population, for a substitute for Moshe. They say, this man Moshe, who took us out of Egypt, he's not returning, and we need something to guide us. And they make for themselves a golden calf. Moshe is obviously Moshe and God, first God then Moshe, are very troubled by this, and they both act in an angry way. Who is the leader of the Jews in their absence? Aaron is left in charge. Aaron, who is going to become the high priest, is left in charge. And he is complicit. I think the words that they use today in the U.S. very often, he colludes with the idol worshippers. And he's involved with the making of the golden calf. At the end of the parsha, it's clear that although those who were involved in making the golden calf are severely punished, some with very violent death at the hands of the Levites, some through a poisonous curse of the ground up golden calf drinking the water which determines guilt or innocence mixed with the gold. But one person is promoted. Aaron. Now we hold, going back even to the time of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, that there are 3 capital crimes. What are they? One of Dam. If you are forced into a situation where you're required to murder somebody else, it would be better to give your own life rather than to commit that murder. If you're in a position where you're forced to commit some kind of significant sexual immorality, then you should give your own life prior to doing that. And if you are required to engage in avodah zarah, in idol worship, pagan worship, foreign worship, you should be prepared to give your life prior to that. For nothing else is a Jew required to sacrifice his life, except those 3 things. Now, it's a complex thing, and there are extensions of that. For instance, if you violate Shabbos, does someone give up their lives? Well, if you're forced to do it as a sign of devotion to idol worship, then perhaps so. But I don't want to get into all the details of it. But clearly, Aaron, the brother of Moshe Rabbeinu, has done exactly that. And yet, the result of all these events is that the Levim become the chosen tribe to minister, to be the intermediary between God and the Jewish people, and to minister on their behalf. A smaller family within that group, that is the descendants of Aaron HaKohen, become the Kohanim, become the priesthood themselves, and are responsible directly for the sacrificial service and their role in the Mishkan and later in the Mikdash as the priestly family. How do we explain that Aaron, who participates in creating a foreign worship, a golden idol, in his brother's absence, not only is not killed, not only is not pardoned, but is actually promoted to the level of the very, very highest position, the holiest position within the community? So the explanations that are given have never been satisfactory to me. I'll give you the 2 classical explanations. One of them is that Aaron knew that Hur had been killed for protesting against the idea of the idol worship. And he said to himself, if they do to me what they've done to Hur, then for sure God will punish them severely. I am the brother of Moshe Rabbeinu, and murdering me will bring upon them a terrible punishment. I mustn't let them do that for their own preservation. And so I will be complicit in the building of the idol in order to save them the greater punishment of murdering the brother of Moshe Rabbeinu. The second reason given why he's not punished, although, by the way, his sons are taken from him later on, and it certainly is a kind of punishment, but they may have been taken from him on their own merit. The second reason given is that he was delaying. He told the idol worshippers, those who wanted to replace Moshe Rabbeinu. By the way, they didn't want to replace God. They wanted to replace the intermediary, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, our teacher. So what Aaron said was, we're not going to do this today. Give me your gold and we'll make an idol. He thought it would take quite a while to collect the gold. Right? By the way, notice it's a golden calf, not a golden cow. A golden calf, you need less amount of gold. And there's a great deal of explanations in the Zohar and the Talmud about this, which I don't have time for today because I got to get to my carnival. But let's just say that Aaron, one of the explanations is that Aaron asked them to gather together the gold, and the next day they would have a sacrifice and a festival in the name of God. So these two explanations, pardon my harshness, and I hope that I will be forgiven for it, could be interpreted on one level as his self-preservation. The story about Hur and himself could have been seen as, an unwillingness to sacrifice his own life. And the second explanation given for his behavior, that he was trying to postpone the event, was a failure. He didn't postpone it. The Jews the Jewish men, not the women. The women didn't give their gold. Jewish men, it says, ripped off their nose rings and earrings, etc., and their gold, and gave it to him very quickly, and said, let's do this thing. So I could only call it, well, at best a misjudgment. Others might have called it failure or incompetence. And yet, something happens here that Aaron is promoted at the end of all of this. So let's run through the story very quickly. The Jews leave Egypt. God destroys Egypt's power. The Jews leave Egypt. They cross the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds. My wife's favorite food at Pesach is yam soup. Here they cross the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, get to the other side, and shortly after that they find themselves at the foot of Sinai. They experience all the drama that we know about. Moshe goes up. Right? So who left Egypt? Well, it turns out it wasn't just the children of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov and their descendants. There was a group called the Erev Rav. That means the mixed multitude. Many, many Egyptians, and also other slaves, understood that the victors in the struggle between the God of Israel and the gods of Egypt was clearly a knockout by the God of Israel. In those days, people didn't believe in a universal God, they believed in local gods. And so many of the Egyptians looked over and said, we're switching sides. And their slaves said, we're going with the Israelites. And the estimates of the numbers of non-descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov in the Midbar by the Talmud vary from as low as 20% to as high as 80%. It could very well have been a majority of the populace in the Midbar, in the wilderness, were not direct descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, which we'll call Bnei Yisrael to separate the two. Is a question, were they appropriate to join? And it seems clear that God told Moshe not to bring these people, and Moshe agreed to be the personal guarantor of them. Moshe, remember, knew the Egyptians on a very, very high level on one part. He grew up in the palace. And he was a revolutionary in the palace, and he was a revolutionary among the Jews. He was not loved by all the Jews, as we know. There are many different stories. Dasan and Aviram are key to this, that there was a lot of mumbling about Moshe Rabbeinu's motives and who he was and what he was up to, etc. He was not somebody who lived among the slaves. But his brother Aaron was. And his brother Aaron was loved by everybody. He was the individual who was able to be a center during this terrible time of the slavery. He was the leader of the Levites, the smallest tribe, and the tribe that never became slaves, They were what we would call the Middle Ages freemen. They couldn't leave, and they owed a debt to the government, to Pharaoh, but they weren't enslaved as the other tribes were. God told Moshe, don't take them. Moshe said, I am their personal guarantor. I am their personal guarantor. What would Aaron have said? He knew them well. Right? I would argue that he knew that God was right on this one, not his brother, his younger brother. Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to heaven, and Aaron knows that there is a cancer inside the camp. But his brother really doesn't buy it. He doesn't even buy it from God. He says, I'm the guarantor. How to get his brother to recognize the issue at hand. How to do it. I would argue that Aaron HaKohen, Aaron the Levite, Aaron the older brother of Moshe, chose this moment to reveal the threat to the entire venture. Some might have even called him, in our common terms, an agent provocateur. He allowed this to happen. And what was the result? Up on Sinai, God says, the children you brought out of Egypt have gone off the way, off the derech. They have built for themselves an idol in my place. And God is angry. Moshe defends the Jewish people. He is the great defender of the Jewish people. Takes the Ten Commandments, the luchos, the tablets, and comes down. And he meets Joshua along the way. By the way, notice God's wording here. He says, the people you took out of Egypt. Anybody who's a parent knows that it's not unusual for his father to say, look at the mess your child made, to the mother. Or for the mother to say, do you see how well my child did in school today? So we take credit for our children when they do well. And when they don't do well, they say, we're taking after you. God said to Moshe Rabbeinu, the people you took out of Egypt, not the people we took out of Egypt, or the people I took out of Egypt. So Moshe is coming down the mountain, runs into Joshua. Joshua says, I hear the sound of war in the camp. Moshe says, it's not war. He comes down to the bottom. He sees it. We know the story. He raises up the luchos and he breaks them. And then he turns to his brother Aaron. I'm collapsing the story for the sake of time. He turns to his brother Aaron. And this is a sentence that you need to read. He said, why did you do this? What did these people do to you that you allowed this to happen? And Aaron says, and I'm going to do the translation rather than the whole process. He says, the people are, and it's translated as stiff-necked, as wild, as, there's a number of translations for it, but it is literally the term Pharaohized. Pharaohized. That is to say, dear brother, now you see literally that there is a tremendous danger to this venture. And after he uses this term, God says, Moshe's eyes were opened, and he made the famous statement, those who stand with God come to me. And that was the beginning of the end, the violent end, for the group that, the central provocateurs, the central group that wanted to build the golden calf and that had reveled before it. In doing this, Moshe, in killing them, Moshe tremendously weakened the power of those opposed to the godly venture. Later on we see in Korach that there's another rebellion, but keep in mind, this group was tremendously weakened by this time. And yet they threatened the administration, Moshe's administration. We'll come to it later. So I would argue that the answer to the reason that Aaron and his family are promoted to high priest is not because he wasn't willing to give up his life. It's not because he wasn't competent. He was extremely competent. Aaron was the one who would walk through the camp and make peace between brother and brother, between businessman and businessman, between husband and wife. He was the great peacemaker, but he was also the great intelligence officer. He was the one who knew every plot that was going on in the camp because he had a relationship with everybody. His brother didn't. His brother's relationship, it says, is bringing God down to the wilderness, and Aaron's job was to bring the wilderness up to God. So Aaron knew the people, he knew the situation, and he made a calculated decision. I will give up my life, and more so, I will give up my merit and my life in the world to come in order to reveal to my brother Moshe the cancer that is eating away at the heart of our camp in the wilderness, and in fact into the whole venture that God has created from the time of Abraham, maybe from the time of creation. And consequently, I will participate in this in order to save the nation. Now, by the way, the idea of doing a sin for a mitzvah is one that we do not encourage. We say doesn't happen, and there are very stiff rules to do it. I would argue that Aaron fits these rules. And he is along with another person who we celebrate on this very same day, Esther Hamalka. Esther from the Purim story, who becomes queen. It's really a very tragic story. She gives up her life, her love, in order to save the Jewish people. And Esther doesn't escape from the palace. She lives in the palace long after Achashverosh is dead and becomes the queen mother to Darius II, who encourages the building and pays for the building of the second temple. But what price did she pay for it? Very great. Now, we know that she's a heroic person, and she was remembered. The merit of Esther preserves us to this day in exile. And now that exile is ending, we can really appreciate what she did. It's the same for Aaron. Aaron said, I will give up my life in the world to come for this sin. This is what I'm suggesting. And the result of it was God had Moshe appoint this man who appeared to be involved in building an idol, but really was involved with revealing the disease within the camp, the disease of foreign worship. God promoted him to the position of highest spiritual authority in the camp. Something to chew on, as I wish you a Shushan Purim Sameach, a happy Shushan Purim, and Shabbat Shalom. Missing you all, loving you all. Take care. Bye now from Carmiel.